Welcome back to the latest episode of Reset Now from the Australian Association of National Advertisers and in partnership with Nine and MI3. I'm Liana Dubois, Nine's Director of Powered, our Marketing Solutions Division for Brands, and with me today is Paul McIntyre, the Executive Editor of MI3. Paul, do you want to tell us a little bit about who's joining us today?
Well, on this cold and bleak winter day in Sydney, Liana, we have someone who will possibly bring a bit of light to the conversation. Doesn't need too much introduction either. Lisa Ronson, Chief Marketing Officer at Coles, previously with Westpac, and before and after that, Tourism Australia. Welcome, Lisa, and over to you, Liana.
Thanks, Paul. So Lisa, we'll get stuck straight in. Obviously, we're slowly coming out the other side of this 3-month journey of COVID-19. And, as restrictions are easing, we're starting to see people go back into pubs and clubs and take friends out for dinner and those sorts of things. What kind of behavioural changes do you think stick around as we come out the other side, or what snaps back? And importantly, what are you seeing in terms of purchase at the aisles and at the checkouts now that's kind of influencing your thoughts in regard to that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Liana. Well, we're not necessarily seeing people snap back, so to speak. There is still a lot of hesitation, and I think if either of you have been out in the last week or so, you'll see that people are still keeping their distances. They're not going back to how they were before, crammed into venues and things like that, which is a good thing. We know that that's helping. We are finding from a customer behaviour point of view, some of the COVID behaviours still are continuing. And by that I mean people are still working from home. So we're in general eating breakfast later and eating dinner earlier. We're snacking quite a bit in the afternoons. Less raw food is being consumed, so salads and things like that. So meat and salads are being replaced with cooking vegetables such as barley, Brussels sprouts, onions, beans, turnips, parsnips, those sorts of things. And as you would imagine, they're using those sorts of vegetables to slow cook. So about 200,000 of us each night are slow cooking more than we would. And this is not comparing to pre-COVID behaviours, it's actually comparing to this time last week. And to your point, Paul, it's cold, but we're comparing like for like, winter for winter, not pre-COVID and post-COVID. So some of those home cooking behaviours are still continuing. And I think will continue based on what we're seeing consumers still buying. They'll continue like that for a little while.
Clearly the stockpiling's probably over, is it, Lisa?
Yeah, we've seen the stockpiling, really end. And if you've been into any of our stores in the last week or so, all restrictions are now off. We do have a large supply of toilet paper, pasta, rice, hand sanitizers, and most of our cleaning lines are fully stocked now. So in most of our stores, I would say in all of our stores, you wouldn't really struggle to buy anything anymore, which is fantastic.
Volumes, Lisa, in terms of those stockpiling categories, are they down now as people use up what's in the pantry? You seeing that at your checkout?
We are starting to see. We saw a little bit of that over the last couple of weeks, but remembering that if you saw our CEO speak when he was talking about toilet paper and to calm people down, the amount of toilet paper we sold in a very short period of time was pretty much what the nation needed for almost a year. So there's still a fair bit of toilet paper, but what remains to be seen is how much consumers will hold in their pantries, how much more that is than what they would have normally pre-COVID. Like in pre-COVID, did you hold 2 packets of toilet paper and now you're holding 5? So we're still trying to work that through, but we are seeing people buying things like toilet paper and some of the panic buying items again. So we are seeing some destocking.
I think that's a really interesting point to make, Lisa. In some of the other conversations that we've had through this series, there seems to be a bit of a lean, even though it's not the zombie apocalypse stockpiling that we saw in the early days, there does seem to be a bit of a lean from consumers wanting to have more squirreled away for a rainy day, whether that's toilet paper stocks or pasta stocks or what's in their savings account in their bank, for example. Yeah. What sort of things are you seeing? What are those increments of what's being stored in pantries for longer periods of time?
It was our hypothesis right from the start, because we've never ever seen anything like this in our lifetime, that consumers would be panicked and anxious about it, so they would generally keep more than what they normally would. So most of us were really busy, buying a lot more convenience, shopping 3 or 4 times a week, stocking up on all the things that we needed. What we're seeing is people shopping less times per week and with bigger baskets, and that's partly because of social distancing and things like that. They're going to the store less and they're buying more. So depending on how much storage space you've got, most Australians would be keeping a little bit more of some of those everyday essentials than what they probably did pre-COVID because of the fear that it may happen again. Because as I said, we've never seen anything like that before. So some behaviours will change, and I think they'll be enduring at least for the next year or so while it's still quite raw in people's minds.
So your hunch then, Lisa, is that, say, as people can go out and dine, for instance, or go to a cafe, they still will be cooking and entertaining at home more as they remain a bit conservative or cautious about things. Do you see that for a year or more or less?
Look, I think it depends on what happens from the economic environment as we get through the COVID pandemic and then into the full-on impacts to our economy. That's when we'll really know how behaviours have changed. And if we do go into some really tough economic conditions, in those sorts of times, and when we've looked at them, GFC and then the last recession in the early 90s, people do go out less and they tend to treat themselves at home more. So those types of behaviours will remain to be seen. And I think given that people are now used to being at home for an extended period of time, going out once a week or twice a week will be a lot more of a treat than maybe what it was before COVID. So there's a lot of variables going on at play. So it would be really hard to get the crystal ball and predict it. But what my hypothesis as a marketer is definitely that behaviours will change, and they'll be changed for an extended period of time.
Those behaviours, we talked about home baking and home cooking. There's been a bit of chatter around about the move to local as well, Lisa, whether that be Australian or local as in local community. What are you seeing there from your stores and behaviour?
Well, we know that it's a really critical component of the weekly shop. So 100% of all of our meat and about 96% of all of our fresh, which largely determines where you're going to go and shop, is Australian. So it's always been important to us, but I think that will continue to grow in importance to support the local providers, the local bakers and things like that. So you would have seen we opened our latest Coles local store, the first in New South Wales, 2 weeks ago in Rose Bay. And we've really lent into that in our Coles local format, as we have in quite a lot of our large format stores. We're starting to range depending on what the local residents want in that catchment. So in Coles Local, we've got the local baker, we've got the local butcher from Bondi. We're supporting a lot of local businesses because that's becoming increasingly important. Then other food trends. So that Coles Local has one of our largest ranges of meat-free products, vegan products. So what we're trying to do is incorporate a lot of the societal shifts, not only as a result of COVID or anything that's happened in recent history, but some of the food trends that were happening anyway around the flight to veganism or flexitarianism or vegetarianism. So we're making sure that we're ranging in our local and all of our stores some of those products that are particularly relevant. And then some treat foods, like we've got pet treat bars, because we're all spending a lot more time with our pets and they probably need to be treated because we're all at home more and they're wondering why. And then we've got help yourself, do it yourself coffee bars. We've got orange juice bars, pineapple slices, a whole lot of great new innovations that consumers are really loving because they're from their local community and they're getting to try it in their Coles stores.
And Lisa, that local strategy has obviously been in play or been in planning for a little while now. You don't open stores overnight, but I think it'd be really interesting to understand how COVID has or has not impacted that move to local and that strategy, and whether or not it's sped it up, slowed it down, or there's been no change at all.
Oh, look, it was very much in our sights anyway. So we've just in the last few weeks launched about 68 new products in our Coles Finest and Convenience range. So we were moving to a lot of differentiated products, a lot of Asian and Indian products within that we ranged in most of our stores, not necessarily all of our stores. So it's been very much a focus of ours to start ranging what customers are really needing based on food trends. Some COVID has sped up some of it, but Coles Local is a really great example for us of displaying a lot of that local produce and us trying different things in store. And it was voted one of the top 30 stores worldwide, the format, in 2020. So we're getting a really great response to it because we're listening to our customers and we're changing based on their changing needs.
Lisa, it's easy with hindsight to have an observation, but I'm going to ask for them anyway. What brands have been doing to market and communicate through COVID? What's your take on it? We had Dean Orbiato from Kia a couple of weeks ago on the series saying there's a sea of sameness in auto. We had Jenny Dill, who's just landed as CMO at Arnott's, talking about how brands, there's too many platitudes and brands need to sort of do more walking rather than talking. Now that you look back, what's your take on that sea of sameness, perhaps?
Look, I would totally agree with that. I think the key through all of this was to be timely, to be relevant, and to insert itself in the conversation as you were required. I think a lot of brands have come out just in the last, it feels sort of 2 to 3 weeks, inserting themselves into the conversation when they don't really have a place in it. It kind of felt like, well, I need to say something, so I'll just say whatever's kind of semi-relevant. But brands that are thanking workers on the front line that don't have any workers on the front line and things like that, it's acceptable to a point, but I think consumers are starting to say, well, what was your role? How did you act? And I think to Jenny's point, totally. It's how you behave in times like this and how you respond and serve your community and therefore serve the country. That's more important than just coming out and making an ad and putting a nice track on it and, just saying something that's not that significant coming from you as a brand. It's definitely walking the talk and doing the right thing. And I think that's why, Coles came through from a brand point of view. We did Coles Community Hour. We did a lot of those great initiatives that were put in place for the right reasons. It was to allow all of the community to get access to things when we're at the height of panic buying. So they had their place, and then, in some of them they're more enduring and some finished. So I really do think that there's some brands that are inserting themselves in the conversation when they probably shouldn't.
Do you think brands and marketers should have known better or should know better than to do that, Lisa?
Yes, they should. We should know our customers and we should know our place and our role. And whenever any of us overreach our place or our role in society as brands in any situation, whether it be a dramatic event or a positive event, regardless, when you overstep your boundaries of what customers are expecting from you, you're always going to get into some pretty murky territory. So that's why it's important that you understand the sentiment, you understand your role in society, in customers' lives, and don't try and ever overplay that.
So Lisa, 2020 has been a year like no other, as you've talked about so far today. And I think, to be honest, all of us need a little something shiny and a little something positive to look forward to. Christmas is just over the horizon, believe it or not, terrifyingly so.
I'm aware of that.
What are you, and Coles plays a really significant role in all of our lives at Christmas time. So what are you seeing? What does Christmas 2020 hold for us? A Christmas like no other, presumably.
I really think it will be a Christmas like no other because, chances are we won't be able to travel overseas. And, there are a significant portion of Australians that would travel overseas around Christmas time or in through January. So I think there's going to be a lot more catching up with friends, a lot more entertaining, I think New Year's Eve is probably going to be one of the biggest New Year's Eve we've seen in a while because we'll all be going, oh, thank goodness we got through 2020 and let's hope that 2021 is a very, very different year. So I do think that there'll be a genuine desire to just want to have some hope and some joy and just be surrounded by family and friends and the people that you love.
Lisa, I've got a final perplexing question for you, which is...
that always worries me, Paul.
Yes. No, you're safe, I suspect. In April, the social media monitoring company Shareably, which basically measures social media engagement, came out in April, said social engagement was down quite considerably, and for major brands like KFC, NAB, even Coles, social media engagement and activity had declined for Coles 65% in April. quite surprising, and I just wanted to get your top line take on that. What do you think of that?
I don't think it's as dramatic as that, and I'd have to look underneath their methodology, because I certainly wasn't seeing that much of a decrease. We were seeing a change in the mix of how our consumers communicated with us, but purely on a social platform perspective. We saw some changes in an increase in views, but maybe a slight decrease in click-throughs. But then across all of our channels, social channels, our customer care unit, and also our Coles Circle, which is a group of customers that we engage on a regular basis, we saw an increased engagement through the course of March, April and May. So those numbers are quite inconsistent with what we're seeing more broadly. We're seeing our customers want to communicate with us more rather than less, whether that to be asking questions or to give us a point of view.
Well, it's interesting. On the flip side, Hillsong, the church, came into the top 10 for brands for the first time. So that's another discussion point another day. I'm not sure, Coles, it's in your territory, but we'll leave it.
Probably not, Paul.
Probably not.
Lisa, thanks so much for your time.
Not for Coles to communicate on that
Yes.
stuff.
Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really wonderful to hear about how Coles has really lent into the community and how your business strategy has, to use buzzword bingo, pivoted through this last 3 months to really act as a service to your customers and to frontline workers as well. And also to see how you've altered and changed your communication and your channel mix and your marketing mix in order to deliver a really strong, educational, informative and supportive message to your customers through those platforms as well. So Paul, always a pleasure to co-pilot with you. Lisa, thank you again. For everybody at home, this has been Reset Now, and we hope to see you next week.